One of America's largest estates has all but been lost to time. Consuming 1,000 acres with up to 400,000 square feet of finished interiors, this is the type of quiet luxury that the likes of the Vanderbilts could only ever dream about. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're uncovering Dreamwold, the estate of Thomas W. Lawson. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. This video is brought to you in part by Victorian Society in America. More on them later. In 1857, Thomas Lawson was born into a working-class Massachusetts family. By the time he was a young teenager, he had already entered the world of finance as a bank clerk in Boston. Though he never finished his formal schooling, Lawson showed an uncanny knack for stock speculation, particularly in the booming copper industry at the turn of the century. As the American copper market surged, Lawson amassed a fortune, but his career was marked by controversy from the start. He had a bad habit of promoting stocks to his vast following, and then exiting his own positions at opportune moments, leaving everyday investors exposed to ruin. Despite the questionable ethics that earned him both wealth and notoriety, Lawson became one of the richest men in the country. In 1899, he teamed up with Henry H. Rogers and William Rockefeller, high-ranking officials in Standard Oil, to form Amalgamated Copper. Their aim was to consolidate several copper mines in Butte, Montana, and dominate the market just as Standard Oil had dominated oil. Investors rushed in, only to find that the copper monopoly that had been promised to them never truly materialized. After being called out for scamming people for millions of dollars, Lawson ultimately broke ranks with his powerful backers and turned himself into a self-styled reformer. He wrote a series of exposés called Frenzied Finance, laying out his version of the underhanded deals in which he had participated. Critics insisted that Lawson's tell-all accounts were riddled with exaggerations and outright lies, but they sold widely and sealed his fame. By the early 1900s, however, Lawson's focus had shifted to a pastoral setting south of Boston. Scituate, Massachusetts was still reeling from the efforts of the Portland Gale, a brutal 1898 storm that had ravaged homes and livelihoods all along the Massachusetts coast. In 1901, Thomas and his wife Jeannie ventured through Scituate on a simple carriage ride. Something about the place caught Jeannie's eye, and Lawson, eager to please, promptly began purchasing land. Soon he launched an astonishing construction project. His initial plan called for a 350-acre estate, which he built at a cost of around $2 million, well over $75 million in today's money. With the community still reeling from the disaster, jobs appeared almost overnight, with local craftsmen, stable hands, laborers, and specialists flocking to the site. By the end of the first year, the fieldstones had all but been removed, and construction on the driveway had started, creating a blank canvas for his dreams to play out. He called it Dreamwold, and it soon encompassed 1,000 acres, an enormous swath of land for a single individual. Those acres supported a mini-town of their own, and many longtime residents marveled at how Dreamwold was its own ecosystem, with dedicated housing not just for people, but also for animals of every breed. Entering the estate, we'll find the main gate and begin making our way forward. As we enter the property, the gatekeeper could direct us to wherever we are going, but we want to see it all. We'll begin heading up the drive past miles of rose bushes growing alongside the white-painted fence. Off in the distance, we start to see a few buildings coming into focus. We'll start exploring from there. As we pull over to the side of the road, we'll stop off at the fire engine house. Being that most of the buildings were covered in cedar shingles, this building proved rather useful over the years. Off to the side, we can see the windmill popping up. We can move in closer to get a better look. The estate was completely self-sufficient. Whether it was gathering electricity or purifying water, we could find a building that suits each facet of life here. The smaller building we saw below the windmill is the dovecote, where dozens of doves could be cared for. The interior, though rather simple compared to some of the buildings we were about to see, was still really comfortable for the doves. Off in the distance, we spot the water tower, which has an observatory at the top to look out over the entire property. And my oh my, what a property this was. As we continue along, we find a post office, once again emphasizing how Dreamwold really was like its own village. There is even a small hospital for taking care of Lawson's thousands of animals, and a forge where anything could be made from scratch or repaired. And this was no simple operation either, employing several men in full-time positions. I think we've seen enough of the small stuff for now. Let's make our way over to the show horse stable. The interior was refreshed with new hay daily, pampering the show horses. And as mentioned, each breed and pedigree had its own quarters, such as the stallion stable. Not too far away, we find the broodmare stables, a bit smaller but with more space for each mare. Their stalls were spacious, with plenty of room to pace about. Though the largest stable was reserved for Lawson's prized horses, those being his racehorses. The building itself was estimated to have been nearing 100,000 square feet, with haylofts and reportedly apartments for workers. We can imagine the racehorses being paraded down to the racetrack one at a time as they pass the judges' stand. And each with their own jockey, we can imagine them racing around the track day after day. Getting back to the buildings, what was possibly the second largest on the property was the riding academy. It took a long time to construct and was no small feat of engineering either. The interior relied solely on steel arches to prop up the roof with no support columns of any kind, which allowed for unobstructed riding space. And with all these horses, you've probably been wondering about the smell. There was actually a sewage house and staff that took care of that. Now when I say the estate was self-sufficient, I mean everything. The poultry house supplied fresh meat and eggs, and the cattle barn supplied fresh meat and milk. There were fields for growing vegetables, and everything you would need for farm-to-table dining, and beyond horses and sustainability, the dog kennels were said to be able to house up to 200 dogs at any given moment. And in case we forgot, this wasn't just a farm, this was Lawson's home, which we haven't even seen yet. Way off in the distance, a sprawling shingle-style mansion hugs the ground with 2 wings protruding from its sides. This is the main house, though I should note that there were other cabins for the family scattered about the property. Each side of the house commanded its own presence, with terrace gardens and vast lawns surrounding it. The rear patio is where we can imagine the family gathering before heading out to the stables, and around to the other side, we find another sprawling veranda offering a bit more seclusion. But to enter the house, we can imagine the family's drivers pulling around to the front porch. This is where we'll hop off to and make our way towards the front door. We can take a quick look at the floor plan before heading on inside, but before we do, a quick word about the sponsor of today's video, Victorian Society in America. Are you captivated by historic architecture? Want to explore, learn, and dive even deeper into the past? With the Victorian Society in America, you'll have the chance to travel to American cities and tour stunning 19th century buildings, pursue learning through internationally acclaimed summer programs in American cities and abroad, including Chicago, Newport, and London to name a few. Additionally, members will enjoy a free subscription to 19th Century, the semi-annual publication packed with articles on art, architecture, preservation awards, and book reviews. Visit the website below in the video description and become part of the Victorian Society in America today. Thank you, Victorian Society in America, for sponsoring today's video. Now back to our tour. The front door opens into the main hall, where the grand staircase twists around the corner behind wood-paneled walls. Unlike many homes of this caliber, the main hall served as a flex room where the family and guests could gather for any number of occasions. This feeds straight into the dining room, where the table could be extended with leaves to hold 30 or 40 dinner guests. To the other side of the main hall, we will find the living room, and though it is the same size as the dining room, it's set for comfortable gatherings with overstuffed furniture. The conservatory connects the living room to the next wing of the house, where we can imagine passing between lush plants year-round. This brings us over to the library, which has floor-to-ceiling bookcases skirting the walls. We might also find the breakfast room, which was not actually displayed on the floor plan, as well as the billiards room, where we can imagine Lawson spending his evenings. Tragically, Lawson's wife Jeannie, the person who had been so captivated by Scituate on their first visit, passed away only a few years after the manor house was complete. She died in 1906, and her loss derailed Lawson's energy for business and innovation. Although he continued to live lavishly, it was clear his best financial days were behind him. Over time, he lost much of his fortune and Dreamwold itself began to change. Fires and demolitions took out major sections of the estate. Some outbuildings survived by being repurposed as private residences, farm operations, or guest houses. Even the manor house, sometimes called Dreamwold Hall, became a function hall in the mid-1900s before being converted into condominium. Meanwhile, Lawson's reputation remained complex. He had once been hailed as a financial genius. He was also widely criticized for encouraging people to invest in speculative ventures that were almost designed to fail. Then in 1907, the 7-masted schooner named after him, the Thomas W. Lawson, went down off the Isle of Sicily, claiming large quantities of oil in the shipwreck. By the early 1920s, creditors were closing in. Dreamwold was no longer an unassailable symbol of his wealth, and in 1922, the estate was auctioned. Just 3 years later in 1925, Thomas W. Lawson died in Boston at the age of 67 with little more than a few bucks to his name. In the end, Thomas W. Lawson's name endures mostly because of Dreamwold and the way it briefly transformed an out-of-the-way seaside town into a place of grandeur. Few estates of that era approached its combination of size, modern conveniences, and architectural variety. Though exact numbers might be lost to time, if one added up every house, stable, workshop, barn, kennel, greenhouse, and specialized facility on the original property, the square footage would likely have soared to hundreds of thousands, somewhere in the range of 300,000 to 400,000 square feet in total. Even now, a century later, remnants of Dreamwold show how a wealthy dreamer tried to create something monumental and nearly succeeded. The structure of the place may have changed, with many of the buildings being lost altogether, but the mark he left on Scituate remains vividly visible to anyone who looks for it. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. What did you think about Dreamwold? Did anything in particular stick out to you? Let me know down below in the comment section. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to Victorian Society in America for sponsoring this video. Check out their website down below in the video description to learn how you can get involved today. And as always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on This House.